Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my big time boxing shows in which we get to interview the folks in boxing that you most want to hear from. And one of the people I always want to hear from is our guest today, Eric Raskin, who has been a terrific boxing writer and podcaster for many years. He did along with Kieran Mulvaney, did the boxing podcast on Showtime for many years, where we were teammates. And he has written for many boxing websites and publications, and currently is just a little bit more than a year into being one of the mainstays of Boxing Scene, which is a terrific boxing website that produces news and information and opinion on the sport of boxing. And I wanted to have him on this week to chat about the coming Hall of Fame and some other things as well. So let me introduce you to one of my favorite writers on the sport of boxing, Mr. Eric Raskin. Eric, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much, Al. That was a very kind intro. And after having you as one of our favorite guests on the Showtime podcast so many times, I guess it was time to turn the tables here.
It was, yeah. We had so much fun on that show, and once in a while we even talked boxing. Not often, but
mostly we talked about Liza Minnelli, as I recall.
Yeah. We did go strongly on Liza Minnelli. That was after I had my kind of campaign to get her into the get the Lincoln Center honors for her. Now, of course, given the change in the Lincoln Center, I'm not sure she'd want the honors, but nonetheless, at that point, it was a big campaign, which I even brought onto the Showtime boxing show somehow, miraculously, and you guys took note of it. You guys were always great on pop culture and everything else on your show, and that was a really great podcast. I know you and Kieran have done other podcasting together, and now you're spending most of your time, in addition to the time you write for on the casino industry, which you are a very good writer and an expert on, you're writing for Boxing Scene. That, it seems to me, has been a very good partnership for you. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was when the Showtime podcast and all things Showtime boxing ended. It was a little bit of a crossroads moment of where are we going to go next. Kieran and I sort of took our podcast independent for a little while, but ultimately the juice wasn't worth the squeeze after we did that for a few months. Thankfully Kieran already had a foot in the door at Pro Box, which then purchased Boxing Scene, and he helped me get in there. And I've been writing, 2 columns. I guess columns is quite. Some of them are columns, some of them are features, but 2 articles a week for Boxing Scene since last February, March, something like that. And it's been great. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to get back into writing about boxing regularly, which I really hadn't been doing as much boxing writing in 10, 15 years or so.
Yeah, well, all the columns / stories are great, and we're going to talk about one of them a little bit in just a moment or two. First, I wanted to talk about this weekend is a very special weekend in boxing. It's the Hall of Fame induction weekend in Canastota. I'll be there because I'm calling the Salida Promotions card on DAZN. That'll be Friday night on June 6th. And so I'm there. So luckily I'm going to be staying over and seeing all the festivities for the induction of the Boxing Hall of Fame. This year is a unique year in a number of different ways. One of the things that makes it unique is that perhaps one of the main figures being inducted is Manny Pacquiao. And ironically, while there's a waiting period for you to get into the Hall of Fame after you've in quotes retired, there have been other boxers who have been inducted and still fought, but Manny Pacquiao is fighting for a world title just a month or so after he's inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame. So that gives it a little twist, doesn't it?
Yes, it certainly does. I had written something a couple months ago noting that the only other boxer who has fought in the same year that he went in was Sugar Ray Leonard. He
Mm,
fought Camacho a few months before his induction. This will be just after, but there have been several other boxers who have come back a few years after getting inducted.
yeah.
The one I had forgotten about, and thankfully my editor David Greisman caught it and told me you need to revise your story before it publishes. Was I had forgotten that Azuma Nelson and Jeff Fenech fought each other for I guess the third
Ah,
time
right.
like several years after they had both gone into the Hall of Fame. But there have been a handful of others. I think Arguello maybe was
Yeah.
another one who made a late comeback after becoming a Hall of Famer. Or there are one or two more. But yeah, this is fairly unique. And I guess with the Hall of Fame recently shortening the window from five years after retirement to just 3 years after
Yeah.
retirement, this may become a little bit more of a regular occurrence going forward
Yeah.
because 3 years is not the be all and end all for too many of the great fighters.
It is not surprising to see a fighter come out of retirement. I think we can both agree to that.
Yes,
It has happened before.
it's much more surprising when a fighter stays retired on the first try. Those you can count on one or two hands, I think.
Yeah, very, very seldom. Marvin Hagler would be one of
Yes.
the few that we could put in that list. So Manny Pacquiao, of course, being inducted, and why not? His career has been remarkable, uh, and um, and he is such a universally popular figure that I would think that is going to center more attention even on these inductions than might otherwise be.
Yeah, that I think this is what Ed Brophy and the folks at the Hall of Fame ideally want is to have at least one true superstar
Yeah,
in every class. You can't always arrange it that way, but
yeah,
when it works out, when you get a guy like Manny Pacquiao, you're pretty much guaranteeing there will be a strong turnout in Canastota. I mean, there's always a solid turnout,
yeah,
regardless of who's going in, just because the weekend is so much fun,
sure.
and boxing fans who've been there can attest to once you go once, you want to keep going back year after year if you can, regardless of who's getting inducted. But yeah, Pacquiao gives it a different kind of energy than certain years where there isn't quite that headline attraction. But yeah, and I know you were there. Was it, I guess, the 2022 year when the three classes went in at once? I mean, that one
Yeah,
will never be topped just for having
yeah,
Floyd Mayweather and Roy Jones and Bernard Hopkins, and
yeah,
on it, like you get down the road to where like Andre Ward and Shane Mosley almost feel like afterthoughts. There were so many like great fighters
yeah,
going in that weekend. So that one's
right.
tough to top, but I'm sure the Hall of Fame is thrilled to have Manny Pacquiao going in this year.
Yeah, and another unique story, and I had him on my show here in recent shows to talk about it, is the great middleweight Michael Nunn. I was intricately involved in the early part of his career when he fought so many times on the ESPN series, the Top Rank Boxing series on ESPN, as he was moving toward his first world title as a middleweight. And during that period, he was so good that he never lost a round on his scorecards for like, I think, 15 fights, literally not a round on any of the judges' scorecards. It was amazing. And then, of course, he ultimately won the championship and would later win the 168-pound title. And then was sent to jail for a long, long, long time because of drug charges that most objective observers think was a harsher sentence than was at all necessary. But Michael Nunn amazingly kept himself uh, optimistic, got out of prison, and now here he is going into the Hall of Fame, and it's a pretty remarkable story.
Yeah, he's part of a wide range of names that you see on the ballot these days that you look
Yeah,
at and you have to think about it long and hard, and you can make a
yeah,
case either way. Like, yeah, that
right.
guy could be a Hall of Famer. I could also see not voting for him, and other than Manny Pacquiao on this year's ballot, there really weren't any absolute slam dunks who jumped out. Michael Nunn is an interesting one in that maybe it was the previous year or 2 years ago. I have voted for him at least
Yeah,
once. but I didn't vote for him this year. It was just he's one of those borderline cases.
Yeah.
I'm happy for him that he got in, and that's part of the fun of it is these ex-fighters getting to have this moment in the sun while we can sit on the sidelines and debate, oh, did that guy deserve it or that guy didn't deserve it or whatever. But Michael Nunn, is one of a long list of guys on the ballot who you could make a case for, and this was his year, and a lot of other, I would say, similarly deserving fighters remain on the ballot, waiting to see if they get the call next year.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, and probably very much describes the other fighter who is going in, Vinny Pazienza. That is a little bit of, to some, is a controversial choice. But he, of course, won world titles and suffered key losses in some of his bigger fights, was a larger-than-life figure in the sport, and has been very vocal about not going in. But he did get the call this year.
Yeah, and I guess he's a perfect example of that debate that you always have of how much of it is a hall of greatness and how much do we rely on that word fame, the hall of fame.
Right.
I mean, Vinny Pazienza was a very popular fighter, fought in a ton of high-profile fights, ended up having a movie made about his life. That never hurts. I think most people look at his resume and poke holes in, I don't know that he belongs in there. I think there was a lot of that the moment that the inductees were announced for this year. There was a lot of pushback on Vinny Paz. But if you view it as a Hall of Fame, I think a stronger case exists to put Vinny Paz in. If Vinny Paz is watching this show, in full disclosure and honesty, I did not vote for you, Vinny, but I'm happy for you. I'm happy for any ex-fighter who gets that call.
You're happy for all the people you didn't vote for that got in.
Always, yes.
So here's a side note that you'll get a kick out of. Yesterday in the mail, I got a $1.64 check from the Screen Actors Guild as a royalty for doing voiceovers on the Vinny Pazienza biopic.
Wow. And you continue to work nevertheless, Al? You couldn't retire after receiving that check?
I thought about it. I thought, I don't even know if I want to do anything more. But then I decided, I'm just going to put it aside for a little nest egg.
This reminds me of the episode of Seinfeld where Jerry was getting such tiny royalty checks that it wasn't worth the hand cramping from signing them. That's a decision you have to make, I guess, with $1.64.
Yeah, I don't know what the lowest amount I've ever gotten. I think below $1 at some point. It's it's astonishing. But in any case, so and also on the women's side, a couple of very deserving people going in. I think one especially Anna Sophie Mathis, who was a very good female fighter. She beat Holly Holm and was a champion. And ironically, Mary Jo Sanders, who's going in, also fought Holly Holm. I actually announced that fight. It was a big fight in women's boxing. She lost to Holly Holm. But both of them were very good women fighters. And I'm so happy to see the women that have made marks going in as well.
Yeah, the women's category is very tricky, and I think I've probably pushed back on the Hall of Fame's approach to the women's category more than any other category, in that 2 a year is a bit much for me.
It might be too much. Yeah,
I think we're cycling through the clear Hall of Famers a little more quickly than would be ideal. One a year would probably be a more appropriate pace, although starting a few years from now, when the women of the current generation start retiring, it's going to be stockpiled again. Yeah. But I'll just shout out the one name that remains on the ballot who hasn't gotten in yet, who I have voted for a few times, is Sumaya Anani. I think is as deserving as anyone who's been on the ballot the last few years. So hopefully she'll get her induction call.
Yeah, soon. I'm sure she will. And you make a very good point. At this point, one a year would probably be okay and appropriate. And you're right. When this generation of women's fighters, moves on from boxing, definitely 2 a year will be appropriate. And one of the reasons it's going to be appropriate is because when we look back at this era of women's boxing, we will have seen that all these great fighters fought each other constantly. And there'd be no criticism of strength of schedule, which, because of the depth of women's boxing before, it still has some depth issues, but not nearly to the degree before people might have argued about for some of the previous folks that were selected. Well, it's going to be a very fun weekend for sure. Are you going to be out there, or are you going to come?
So I will not. Unfortunately, I have a couple of scheduling conflicts. This is Saturday
You
is my
have big personal parties going
I
on,
I
don't
do.
you?
I dropped this into my column
Yeah,
this week that it's Saturday is my daughter's high school graduation and
wonderful.
Sunday is my mother's 80th birthday party. So circle of life stuff going on. The Hall of Fame has to take a back seat this year.
Yes, I would think so. You would not be spoken to by most
No.
immediate members of your family if you missed that. Before I let you go, I want to chat a little bit about your a column that you did about a fight that just happened where Caleb Plant um, was upset by Armando Resendiz in a fight that Resendiz was like a pretty significant underdog, but most folks that had seen him fight and know boxing, I'd announced a couple of his fights, knew that it wasn't absurd to think he was going to be competitive with
Right.
Caleb Plant, and that he had some possibility certainly to win. And when he did, and it for Caleb Plant, and you talk about it in the column you wrote, this puts him in a very interesting position at age 32, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think coming into this fight, nobody was talking about, uh-oh, is Caleb Plant nearing the end? But
Yeah,
as soon as the fight started to not go his way, you look back at some of his recent results and wonder if we need to reassess where he was coming into
yeah,
this and therefore where he is now. His struggle in his previous fight against is it Trevor McCumbee, I think that was
Crumbly,
his
yeah,
name.
yeah,
He really struggled in that fight and
yeah, he
then,
did.
changed his style impressively mid-fight and took the fight to McCumbee and started going to the body and turned things
Right.
around and kind of erased what had happened in those first few rounds
Yeah,
and so any thought that Caleb Plant is slipping, we were able to ignore it then. You go back to the fight before that, David Benavidez put a pretty good beating on Plant as we hit the late rounds of
yeah,
that fight. Plant lasted the distance. He's a tough guy. But when you add those up, it is now, in hindsight, it's always obvious, isn't it? But it is
yeah,
now easy
yeah,
to look at what happened to Resendez and say, you know what? Caleb Plant's best days may be behind him. He was slowing down a little bit, especially in the second half of this fight. He just did not have much in the tank. And Resendez, as you said, if you paid attention to him coming in, you knew this was a
yeah,
solid, competent fighter. But he rose
right.
a level above that. He fought better than I'd ever seen him fight. He had really took the fight to Plant after maybe taking a round or two to gauge what he had in front of him, and then really started taking the fight to Caleb Plant. Never looked intimidated, never looked concerned about the punches coming back at him. I was really impressed with Resendez and combine that with what we now assess that Caleb Plant. I'm not saying he's done, but I think
No,
as a championship level fighter, I would predict that he probably is done.
yeah, and part of the problem is he doesn't have power at 168 that helps is the equalizer for him.
Right.
One of and I'll let you go after this, but one of the sidelights to this fight that is fascinating is we always have a scorecard now. It seems in uh, every major boxing match that is ludicrous, and we
Yeah.
can't explain it. And in this one, we had one in which David Sutherland it ended up being a split decision because David Sutherland scored the last 3 rounds for Caleb Plant when both of the other judges, along with every sane human being who watched the fight,
Yep.
scored on behalf of Resendez. And it's puzzling, right? And every
Yes.
time, I think you wrote in your article, he slinks off into the dead of night. There's one way to put it, and he's gone. And it's not that Sutherland always turns in terrible cards, though he's had some clinkers.
Right.
But how do we explain this? Is it? I mean, one of the ways, of course, is the obvious one of them thinking that an A side fighter is going to lose, and somehow we need to keep that cash cow for whoever it is that's involved. That's the
Right.
obvious answer, but I mean, beyond that, it's very hard to fathom.
Yeah, these situations always bring me back to it was what Max Kellerman had said years ago after the Lewis Holyfield draw about the controversial Eugenia Williams scorecard. It's either incompetence or corruption. It's got
Yeah,
to be
right.
one or the other, and we don't want to accuse anything
Or
of
bias, or just bias,
right, which I guess
as
could be
much as
considered sort
corruption.
of a form of
Yeah,
corruption, but
right.
not exactly right. And
Yeah,
so yeah, so it could be that in this case. But I mean, it was so unthinkable to give him all
amazing.
three of
All
those rounds
three.
that I had to throw out there as one possibility. I don't know exactly how the marking of the scorecard works, but whether there's some chance Sutherland got confused and transposed the corners the last three rounds. I mean,
Interesting point.
it's like every bit as logical as any other explanation, I suppose, because it's just so hard to watch those rounds and
Yeah,
actually think you want to give one of the three to Plant because you
yeah.
had a weird round, okay, but all three just makes no
Well,
sense. And yeah.
if I was David Sutherland and that were the explanation, boy, I'd be speaking out right now. I don't know
Yeah,
if
and that
anyone.
comes back to what you were saying, that the commissions never let the judges speak to the reporters, and that's a real problem that I'd love to see.
Yeah,
And maybe not immediately after the fight. If you want to say,
yeah,
our head regulator is going to talk to the judges afterwards,
right,
and then we'll make them available to the
right.
press tomorrow or
Even
something.
that would be acceptable.
Right, exactly. But yeah, David Sutherland, for his own sake, should be
Yeah,
wanting to defend his scorecard and explain what he thought he saw.
especially if that last explanation you gave, which is not untoward, that actually almost sounds like it's plausible. But
Right.
if we don't hear from him at any point, then we're going to have to probably throw that one out. But
Yeah.
it was a good try on your part, Eric, to
I'm
explain
I'm
this.
I'm here for you, David Sutherland.
No,
I'm here for you. You need
you
excuses and
came.
spin. I'm your guy.
That was very good. I didn't expect that one. Well, hey, first of all, thank you very much for visiting with me and sharing your boxing knowledge. I may call on you again and bother you, so don't just be careful about. You can silence your phone or pretend you didn't get my email, and but I will probably be badgering you again.
You are welcome to bother and badger me anytime, Al. It is always a pleasure talking to you and an honor to come on your show.
Very good to talk to you, and I want to urge everybody to, of course, look at Eric's fine columns in at Boxing Scene, which is a terrific site, and you can learn a lot more about the sport of boxing. My thanks to Eric, and my thanks to you for watching here on Big Time Boxing. Happy that you're with us, and we'll be back next time with another guest from the world of boxing. And a reminder that if you like what you're seeing here and on the Salida Promotions YouTube channel, please subscribe. And we want to have you as part of the family. Take care, everybody.